A living animal born before America was founded is swimming somewhere under the Arctic ice right now. The Greenland shark can live past 400 years, maybe 500, and for most of human history we had no idea. We were completely wrong about this creature. Today we go inside the coldest, darkest water on Earth to find the oldest living animal with a backbone ever discovered. We'll find out what lives in its eyes, why its flesh can poison you, and what it might teach us about aging forever. If you enjoy the ride, subscribe and stay close. Let's go. A fisherman hauled up a net in the freezing waters off Greenland, and what came up made him stop cold. The animal in the net was massive, grey, thick, slow-moving. It looked prehistoric. The crew had seen plenty of sharks before, but this one felt different. Its eyes were cloudy, its body was scarred, and it moved like something that had been alive for a very, very long time. For centuries, fishermen across the Arctic pulled these sharks up by accident. Nobody studied them seriously. Nobody asked the hard questions. Scientists assumed Greenland sharks lived maybe a few decades, similar to other large sharks. That seemed reasonable. That seemed safe. That was completely wrong. The shift happened in the early 2010s, when a team of marine biologists decided to do something that had never been done properly before. They wanted to know exactly how old these animals could get. They collected samples from dozens of Greenland sharks caught as bycatch, meaning accidentally trapped in fishing nets meant for other species. Then they applied a dating method so precise it could measure time inside a single cell. What they found broke every assumption in the field. The oldest shark in their sample was a female. She was over 13 feet long. That sounds big until you realise Greenland sharks can reach over 20 feet, making a 13-footer something closer to a teenager in their world. Scientists ran the numbers. They checked them again. Then they went quiet for a moment, because the result was almost too strange to say out loud. She was at least 392 years old. Pause on that. 392 years. That means she was born sometime around 1620. The Pilgrims had just arrived in America. Shakespeare had just died. The modern world as we know it did not exist yet. And this shark was already alive, already swimming in the dark below the Arctic ice. The study came out in 2016 and hit the science world like a depth charge. Every textbook assumption about vertebrate aging, which means aging in animals with a backbone like fish, reptiles, birds and mammals, had to be reopened. A fish had just claimed the title of oldest known vertebrate on Earth, and it had done it quietly, in the dark, where nobody was watching. What made this discovery even harder to process was how the shark looked. Scientists described it as appearing healthy, normal, like a shark in middle age, not an animal older than the United States. There were no obvious wrinkles, no signs of breakdown, no visible wear that matched 4 centuries of life. Its body had somehow kept running, decade after decade, in conditions that would kill almost anything else. The Arctic deep where Greenland sharks live sits at temperatures close to freezing. The pressure at their preferred depth is crushing. There is almost no light. Food is scarce. For most animals, those conditions are a death sentence. For the Greenland shark, they seem to be the secret to something extraordinary. But the real question sitting underneath all of this was not just how old they can get. The real question was how. What is happening inside that body that allows it to survive for centuries while everything around it dies? The answer starts somewhere most people would never think to look. It starts inside the shark's eye. And what scientists found there changed the entire investigation. Before we get to what's inside the eye, we need to understand the machine that carries it. The Greenland shark is not elegant. It is not fast. It does not look dangerous in the way a great white does, all muscle and speed and razor teeth. The Greenland shark looks like something designed by a committee that had one goal: survive everything forever. Its body is wide and heavy, built more like a submarine than a torpedo. Adults regularly grow to 14, 15, 16 feet long. The largest ever recorded stretched past 21 feet, roughly the length of a full-size moving truck. They can weigh over 2,000 pounds, heavier than most pickup trucks you see on the highway. Their skin is rough and grey, mottled with dark patches, and covered in tiny tooth-like scales that feel like coarse sandpaper if you run your hand against them. Their fins are small for their size. Their tail moves in a slow, sweeping motion. Everything about their body language communicates patience. They are in absolutely no hurry. Scientists clocked their average cruising speed at around 0.3 miles per hour. That is slower than a leisurely human walk. A healthy adult walking to the kitchen moves faster than a Greenland shark at full cruise. Even at their fastest burst, they top out around 1.7 miles per hour, slower than most people jog. For a predator, that seems like a fatal flaw, and yet they eat seals, they eat large fish, they have been found with horses and reindeer in their stomachs. How does the slowest large shark on Earth catch anything quick enough to run away? Part of the answer is patience. Greenland sharks are thought to be ambush hunters in certain situations, drifting silently near sleeping seals or prey resting on the seafloor. Their dull colouring makes them nearly invisible in dark water. By the time anything notices them, it's over. But their body has another trick. In the extreme cold of the Arctic deep, the shark's body temperature drops to match the water around it, hovering just above freezing. Cold blood in a cold environment means every chemical process in the body slows way down. Their heart beats slowly. Their cells divide slowly. Their metabolism, the engine that burns through energy, runs at a fraction of the speed of most other large animals. Think of it like a phone set to ultra-low power mode. It does less, but it lasts much, much longer. This slowdown is the foundation of everything. A body running at low speed burns less fuel, accumulates less cellular damage, and ages more slowly at the biological level. Most large mammals burn hot and bright and die young on a geological scale. The Greenland shark burns like an ember, barely glowing, for centuries. Their skeleton is made of cartilage, like all sharks, which means no bones. Cartilage is lighter and more flexible than bone. In most sharks, scientists use growth rings on vertebrae to estimate age, similar to counting rings in a tree trunk. In the Greenland shark, those rings are so faint and irregular they're almost useless for dating. That problem stopped researchers for decades. Nobody could figure out how old these animals actually were. Every method they tried on other species failed here, until someone thought to look where no one had looked before, inside the lens of the eye. And what they found there was something that had been quietly recording history since before most countries on Earth existed. The eye of a Greenland shark is small for such a large animal, about the size of a golf ball, and in most individuals it is covered with a pale, ghostly film that makes the shark look almost blind. We will get to that parasite later because it deserves its own chapter. But inside that cloudy eye is something remarkable, something scientists almost overlooked. Every vertebrate eye, including yours, has a lens at its centre. That lens is made of proteins. And here is the key detail. The proteins in the very centre of the lens are laid down at the moment of birth and never replaced. Ever. The outer layers of the lens grow and change over time, but the innermost core stays exactly as it was on day one. For most animals, that fact is just biology. For dating the Greenland shark, it became a time machine. Scientists realised that if they could measure what those original proteins were made of, they could calculate when the shark was born. The method they used is called radiocarbon dating, and to understand why it worked so perfectly here, you need to know about one of the strangest side effects of the Cold War. Between the 1940s and the 1960s, the United States and the Soviet Union detonated hundreds of nuclear bombs in the atmosphere as part of weapons testing. Each explosion released enormous amounts of a specific type of carbon called carbon-14 into the air. Marine life absorbed that carbon through the food chain. By the early 1960s, carbon-14 levels in ocean animals had roughly doubled compared to before the testing began. Scientists call this spike the bomb pulse, and it left a datable mark inside any animal alive during that era, like a timestamp burned into the tissue. When researchers examined the eye lenses of Greenland sharks caught as bycatch, they looked for that bomb pulse signature. Sharks with elevated carbon-14 in the core of their eye lens were born during or after the bomb testing era, meaning they were younger. Sharks with low pre-bomb carbon-14 levels were born before the 1950s. Some were born long before. The smallest sharks in the sample, the young ones, showed the expected elevated signature. The largest sharks showed almost none. Their eye lens cores had formed so far back in time that there was no trace of atomic testing at all. From there, scientists combined the radiocarbon data with the known relationship between a Greenland shark's body length and its age. Larger body equals older animal. By cross-referencing size and carbon data across dozens of individuals, they built a growth curve. They could now estimate the age of any Greenland shark with a reasonable degree of confidence. The results stretched the known limit of vertebrate life on Earth. The oldest individual measured came back at a minimum age of 392 years, with the range stretching to possibly 512 years. 512 years. Older than the printing press becoming widespread in Europe. Older than Columbus reaching the Americas. A fish swimming in Arctic water today may have been born before the modern world began. The team published their findings and the scientific community went still for a moment. Then came the follow-up question nobody had thought to ask before. If they can live this long, when do they grow up? The answer was even more disturbing. 392 years old. That is the confirmed minimum for the largest female in the study. And it demands a real picture, because numbers alone do not carry the weight of what that means. 1620. That is roughly when she was born, the year the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock. King James I was still alive in England. Galileo was still publishing his first major works on astronomy. The continent that would become the United States was mostly unmapped wilderness to European eyes. She was alive for all of it. She was swimming in the dark under the Arctic Ocean while the American Revolution happened above her, while the Civil War tore the country apart, while the Wright brothers flew their first plane, while both world wars ended, while astronauts walked on the moon. None of it reached her. The water above stayed cold. She kept swimming. To live that long as a vertebrate animal is almost without precedent. Before this study, the record holder for oldest known vertebrate was the bowhead whale, with a confirmed age of over 211 years. The Greenland shark demolished that record by nearly 2 centuries. What makes this even harder to wrap your head around is the math of her life. Most large animals go through distinct life stages: birth, growth, sexual maturity, reproduction, and then a long, slow decline into old age. We tend to picture aging as something that accelerates over time, a slow burn that picks up speed in the final stretch. The Greenland shark seems to run on a completely different clock. Growth is glacial, development is glacial. Everything is stretched out across centuries in a way that makes human life look like a sprint. Scientists estimate that a Greenland shark grows roughly 1 centimetre per year. That is less than half an inch annually. A shark that is 10 feet long has been growing for somewhere around 150 years just to reach that size. The female in the study, at 13 feet, had been alive long enough to watch entire civilizations rise and fall. And the older range of the estimate, up to 512 years, pushes back even further. A 500-year-old Greenland shark would have been born while Leonardo da Vinci was still alive. While European explorers were first mapping the Caribbean, while the Ottoman Empire was near its peak power, scientists are careful to note the uncertainty in these upper estimates. The bomb pulse method gives a solid floor, a minimum age, but the ceiling is harder to pin down precisely. What is certain is that animals over 300 years old exist in this species. What remains open is just how far past that the oldest individuals actually go. And here is where the story gets stranger. That 13-foot female was nowhere near the biggest Greenland shark scientists have seen. Some reach 21 feet. If the relationship between size and age holds, and the data strongly suggest it does, then the largest animals out there are potentially far older than 392 years. The shark that broke the record may not even be the oldest one alive right now. There could be something swimming in the deep Arctic today that was born before any European had ever seen North America. That thought does something to you when you sit with it. And the next question it raises is almost worse. How is any living body supposed to stay functional for that long? Every cell in your body is on a timer. Each time a cell divides, copying itself to replace old or damaged cells, the ends of your chromosomes get slightly shorter. Those ends are called telomeres. Think of them like the plastic tips on the end of a shoelace. Over time, they wear down. When they get too short, the cell can no longer divide properly. It breaks down. You age, you die. This process happens at a rate tied directly to how fast your metabolism runs. Metabolism is the speed at which your body burns fuel and runs its internal chemistry. Burn hot and fast like a small mammal, and you age quickly. A mouse lives 2 or 3 years because its internal engine is running at maximum speed around the clock. A tortoise lives over 100 years, partly because its engine barely ticks over. The Greenland shark is the extreme version of this principle. Its body temperature sits just above freezing, matching the Arctic water around it. At those temperatures, every chemical reaction in the body slows dramatically. Enzymes work slower, cells divide slower, DNA damage accumulates slower. The entire biological clock that governs aging crawls at a pace you can barely measure in human terms. Here is a comparison that makes this concrete. A warm-blooded animal like a dog runs its metabolism at roughly 99 degrees Fahrenheit internally, all the time, even in cold weather. The Greenland shark runs at around 30 degrees, just barely above the freezing point of salt water. That temperature gap does not just represent a small difference in speed, it represents a fundamental difference in how fast the machinery of life wears out. Scientists who study aging call this the rate of living theory. The idea is that every animal is born with a kind of biological budget. Burn through it fast and you die young. Spend it slowly and you last. The Greenland shark has the most extreme budget management of any vertebrate we have ever found, but temperature alone does not explain everything. Cold water fish like Arctic cod also live in near freezing water, and they do not reach 400 years. Something else is happening inside the Greenland shark's biology that science has only begun to pick apart. One piece of the puzzle involves the shark's extremely low heart rate. Their heart beats so slowly that measuring it requires specialized equipment. A low heart rate means the cardiovascular system, the network of vessels and pumps that keeps oxygen moving through the body, experiences far less wear over time. Every beat of the heart creates a tiny amount of stress on the walls of blood vessels. Multiply that by billions of beats over a normal mammal's lifetime, and you see why cardiovascular disease is one of the leading causes of aging-related death across species. The Greenland shark's heart may beat as few times in a year as your heart beats in a single day. Another piece involves their extraordinary ability to survive with very little oxygen. Deep water has less dissolved oxygen than shallow water. The Greenland shark has adapted to function in these low oxygen zones far better than most large fish. Low oxygen environments, paradoxically, can reduce certain types of cellular damage associated with aging. Every adaptation seems to point in the same direction. This animal evolved for longevity the way a race car is engineered for speed. Every system is tuned for one outcome: keep going, keep going, keep going. But the strangest piece of this puzzle has nothing to do with temperature or heart rate. It has to do with something that has been quietly building up inside the shark's body for centuries. If you pulled a Greenland shark out of the ocean and ate its flesh raw, you would be in serious trouble within minutes. Not because of bacteria, not because of parasites, because of chemistry. The flesh of a Greenland shark contains very high levels of a compound called trimethylamine oxide, along with a related substance called trimethylamine that forms as the fish deteriorates. These compounds, when consumed in large amounts by humans or other mammals, act like a powerful neurotoxin. The effects mimic extreme alcohol poisoning. Victims experience dizziness, loss of coordination, vomiting, and in severe cases, convulsions. Dogs that eat Greenland shark meat have been known to lose the ability to stand up straight for hours. So why does the shark carry this stuff? Trimethylamine oxide is actually a protective compound. In deep, cold, high-pressure environments, the proteins inside animal cells tend to misfold. Misfolded proteins are broken proteins, and broken proteins mean broken cells. Trimethylamine oxide acts as a stabilizer, keeping proteins folded correctly under conditions that would otherwise cause cellular collapse. The colder and deeper the water, the more of it an animal tends to carry. The Greenland shark, living as deep as 7,000 feet in near-freezing water, has evolved to pack this compound into its tissues at extremely high levels. For the shark, it is a biological tool. For anything that eats the shark, it is a hazard. This creates an interesting problem. How do you safely eat one of the only large predators in the Arctic? Indigenous Greenlandic people and Icelanders figured out the answer over many centuries of trial and error. They developed a fermentation process that, over months of careful preparation, allows the toxic compounds to break down into safer forms. The result is a dish called hakal, which is fermented Greenland shark meat. The finished product has an extremely strong smell, famously described as one of the most intense food odours in the world, but the toxicity drops to a level the human body can process. The preparation involves burying the shark meat in gravel, or hanging it in ventilated drying huts for 4 to 5 months. The curing process allows bacteria and oxidation to convert the harmful compounds. The final product is still pungent enough that most first-time tasters, including experienced chefs, struggle to get it down. But it is safe, and for communities living in some of the harshest food environments on Earth, it was a crucial protein source. This relationship between humans and the Greenland shark stretches back hundreds of years. Indigenous hunters knew this animal long before any scientist ever described it formally. They knew it was slow. They knew it was dangerous to eat raw. They knew it lived in deep, dark water. What nobody knew, until very recently, was just how ancient each individual animal they encountered actually was. A shark eaten as a traditional meal in Iceland today might have been swimming freely when Iceland itself was still a Danish colony. The animals that fed communities for generations were themselves ancient beyond any reasonable human scale. And that toxicity, that strange chemical armour the shark carries in its flesh, turns out to be connected to something even more surprising. Something that may explain not just how the shark survives the deep, but how it survives time itself. Look at a Greenland shark's eye and you will notice something that seems wrong. There is something attached to it. A pale, worm-like creature, roughly 2 to 3 inches long, dangling from the surface of the cornea like a ghostly ribbon. It sways with the current as the shark moves through the water. It has been there for years, possibly decades. This is a copepod called Omatocoita elongata. It is a tiny crustacean related distantly to crabs and shrimp that has evolved to spend its entire life attached to the eye of a Greenland shark. It anchors itself to the cornea, the clear surface of the eye, and feeds on the eye tissue directly. Over time, it causes significant damage to the cornea. Studies suggest the parasite causes partial to severe blindness in the majority of Greenland sharks examined. Most Greenland sharks are functionally blind, or close to it. Pause on that. The ocean's longest living vertebrate, a predator capable of taking down seals and large fish, is likely operating without reliable vision. In most large predators, losing eyesight is a death sentence. For the Greenland shark, it appears to be an inconvenience. Scientists have found these parasites on sharks of all sizes, from small juveniles to enormous adults. The relationship appears to be ancient, almost permanent, woven into the shark's life cycle. Some researchers have suggested the copepod may even benefit the shark in some minor way, acting as a lure that attracts small fish toward the shark's face. The evidence for that is limited and contested. What is clear is that the shark does not seem to fight the parasite off. It tolerates it. The copepod's attachment point, directly on the cornea, is one of the most sensitive surfaces in the vertebrate body. In humans, even a small scratch on the cornea causes sharp, immediate pain and rapid healing response. The Greenland shark shows no visible distress response to an organism chewing on that surface for decades. This raises serious questions about the shark's pain-sensing system. Scientists believe the extreme cold may suppress certain neural responses that would otherwise create pain signals. The shark's nervous system seems tuned for a different kind of survival, one that ignores damage it cannot prevent and compensates with other senses. And those other senses are extraordinary. A nearly blind Greenland shark can still detect electrical fields generated by living muscle, the same way sharks have always located prey. It can smell blood diluted to almost nothing across hundreds of yards of open water. It can detect pressure changes caused by another animal moving nearby through specialized cells running along its body called the lateral line. The Greenland shark replaced sight with a suite of other detection tools so precise that blindness barely slows it down. It has been doing this successfully for longer than most nations have existed. But here is what stays strange. The parasite hurts the eye. The shark survives anyway. The shark lives for centuries. And in all that time, the parasite never kills it. The shark's immune system and healing ability are somehow keeping the animal alive and functional under conditions that would end most other creatures quickly. What that says about the shark's biology is something scientists are only beginning to understand, and it connects directly to a deeper mystery, one that might have more to do with your future than with any shark's past. A seal is sleeping near the surface. The water above it is black. There is no light. Nothing visible is moving. 60 feet below, something has already detected the seal. It has been tracking the electrical pulse from the seal's heartbeat for the last several minutes. It is moving toward it at 1/3 of a mile per hour, slower than you walk, generating almost no pressure change in the water around it. The seal has no idea. The Greenland shark hunts in total darkness, often at depths where sunlight never reaches, using a system of senses that most people do not even know fish have. Every living animal generates a small electrical field. Your heart beating, your muscles contracting, your nerves firing, all produce electrical signals. In air, these signals dissipate almost instantly. In salt water, they travel much further. Sharks, all sharks, have organs in their snouts called ampullae of Lorenzini. These are tiny jelly-filled pores that can detect electrical fields so faint they measure in the billionths of a volt. Imagine detecting the static electricity from a single AA battery from several feet away through solid seawater. That is roughly the sensitivity involved. Greenland sharks also carry the lateral line, a fluid-filled canal running along the length of the body from head to tail. Hair-like cells inside this canal detect the tiniest changes in water pressure. A fish moving 20 feet away disturbs the water just enough to register. The lateral line picks it up and feeds the information directly to the brain. Smell adds the third layer. Sharks are famous for their sense of smell, and Greenland sharks are no different. A very small amount of blood in the water will draw them from remarkable distances. Their olfactory system, the organ responsible for smell, takes up a significant portion of their brain compared to the vision centers, which are relatively small. Together, these three systems create a picture of the world that does not require light at all. The shark navigates, hunts, and survives in conditions where its eyes, even undamaged ones, would provide almost nothing useful. This matters beyond biology. It explains how a slow, partially blind, cold water animal manages to eat well enough to stay alive for 4 centuries. The Greenland shark does not chase prey. It finds prey that cannot detect it coming, and is already positioned for the final moment before anything can react. Recorded stomach contents from Greenland sharks have turned up harbour seals, harp seals, hooded seals, large Atlantic halibut, skates, and smaller sharks. Scientists have also found remains of reindeer, horses, and polar bears in some individuals, almost certainly scavenged from carcasses that fell or drifted into the water rather than actively hunted on land. Each meal matters more for this animal than it would for almost any other predator. With a metabolism this slow, A single large seal might sustain a Greenland shark for weeks. Food is fuel, and this animal manages its fuel supply with a precision that makes it nearly impossible to starve in any environment where prey occasionally exists. The darkness that would strand other predators is this shark's home. It has spent centuries perfecting survival inside it, and what it found down there, what it adapted to, goes far deeper than hunting strategy. Here is the most unsettling number in this entire story. Female Greenland sharks are believed to reach sexual maturity at around 150 years old. 150 years. That is the age at which a female is old enough to have her first pup. Before that age, she is physiologically a juvenile. Her reproductive system has not fully developed. She cannot breed. To put that in human terms, imagine spending the first 40% of your entire life in childhood. Imagine that adulthood, in the biological sense, does not arrive until you are older than the United States has been a country. Scientists pieced this estimate together by combining size at maturity data with the age-length relationship they built from the radiocarbon study. Female Greenland sharks reach reproductive maturity at roughly 13 feet. Given the growth rate of about 1 centimetre per year, a 13-foot shark is approximately 150 years old. That math produces a number so extreme that researchers initially found it difficult to accept. No other vertebrate comes close to this. The bowhead whale, the previous record holder for vertebrate longevity, reaches sexual maturity at somewhere around 25 years. Even the famously slow-maturing Galapagos giant tortoise becomes sexually mature by around 40 years of age. The Greenland shark takes the reproductive timeline of all other long-lived animals and multiplies it by several times over. This creates a conservation problem that should alarm everyone who hears it. Fisheries, oceans, and wildlife populations recover when animals reproduce faster than they are removed. Take too many out too fast, and the population collapses. Most fish species can recover from heavy pressure within years or decades because they produce thousands of offspring frequently. The Greenland shark produces a relatively small number of pups, and it waits a century and a half before it even starts. If a population of Greenland sharks were severely reduced today, it would take generations of human history to recover. Not decades, generations. The slowest reproducing vertebrate on Earth is also one of the least understood, and it spent centuries being dragged up as accidental bycatch with nobody paying attention. The pups themselves are born alive, which is common in sharks, at a length of around 15 inches, roughly the size of a large ruler. A newborn Greenland shark has centuries of growing ahead of it before it becomes an adult. It will swim through decades of change, shifting ocean temperatures, shifting prey populations, shifting human activity above it before it ever reproduces once. And here is what science still does not know: exactly how many pups a female produces per pregnancy, or how often she breeds. No one has ever observed a Greenland shark giving birth in the wild. No one has ever witnessed mating. These events happen somewhere in the deep Arctic and deep Atlantic, out of reach of any camera or tracking device scientists have managed to deploy so far. The most reproductively extreme vertebrate on Earth is keeping its most private moments completely hidden. And that mystery connects to an even bigger one. Where exactly do these animals go, and how far do they travel across an entire ocean? Scientists tagged a Greenland shark in the waters off Greenland and waited. The tag was a data logger, a small device attached near the shark's dorsal fin designed to record depth, water temperature, and location, before eventually popping off and floating to the surface to transmit its data to a satellite. These pop-up tags are the primary tool researchers use to follow animals that live too deep and move too slowly for traditional boat-based tracking. When the tag surfaced months later, the data it carried shocked the team. That single shark had travelled over 1,700 miles. From the cold waters off Greenland's western coast, it had crossed a significant portion of the North Atlantic Ocean, moving into warmer waters well south of its typical Arctic range. It was not the only one. Multiple tagging studies across different research groups have confirmed that Greenland sharks are far more wide-ranging than anyone suspected. Individual sharks have been tracked moving from the Canadian Arctic into the deep Atlantic. Others have been recorded off the coasts of Portugal and the British Isles. Still others have shown up in the Gulf of Mexico. And in 2015, scientists made a discovery that genuinely seemed impossible at first. Greenland sharks were found living in the deep waters of the Caribbean Sea. The Caribbean, the warm, tropical, sun-drenched Caribbean. An environment that seems like the opposite of everything the Greenland shark needs. Water temperatures at the surface there reach 80 degrees Fahrenheit in summer. For a cold water animal built for near-freezing conditions, that should be lethal. The solution was depth. At depths below 2,000 to 3,000 feet, even in the tropics, water temperatures drop dramatically. The Caribbean deep holds pockets of cold, dense water that maintain temperatures close to what the Greenland shark experiences in the Arctic. These sharks had found cold water refuges hidden beneath warm tropical seas and moved right in. The discovery proved that the Greenland shark's range is effectively the entire deep Atlantic, from the Arctic south to the equator, so long as cold deep water exists. The species is far more abundant and widespread than the scientific community had estimated. This raises an immediate question about the depth itself. How deep do they actually go? Tagging data and deep-sea camera footage have recorded Greenland sharks at depths exceeding 7,000 feet below the surface. 7,000 feet. That is deeper than most military submarines are rated to operate. The pressure at that depth is roughly 200 times the pressure at sea level. The darkness is absolute. The temperature hovers just above freezing, and the Greenland shark is down there, moving, hunting, living. This depth range also has implications for how many of them exist in places humans have never looked. Most shark surveys focus on coastal and surface waters. The deep ocean remains the least explored environment on Earth. The true global population of Greenland sharks is unknown, and the estimates scientists do have are almost certainly incomplete. What lives down there, how old it is, and what it has survived remains mostly a mystery. But the clues coming back from tracking data suggest something even stranger about how these animals relate to the specific places they call home. 7,000 feet is difficult to picture, so picture this instead. The Empire State Building stands 1,450 feet tall from sidewalk to antenna tip. Stack 5 of those on top of each other. That is roughly the depth where Greenland sharks have been recorded swimming, going about their lives in water that crushes, freezes and blinds anything not built for it. At 7,000 feet below the surface, sunlight has been completely absent for thousands of feet above you. The water pressure pushes on every square inch of your body with a force equal to roughly 200 times what you feel at sea level. Sound travels differently. Time feels different. To any human, it would be immediate death without extreme engineering protection. To the Greenland shark, it is Tuesday. Understanding what happens to a body at those depths requires understanding pressure. At the surface, your body is adapted to 1 atmosphere of pressure. Descend into the ocean, and the pressure climbs fast, 1 additional atmosphere for every 33 feet. At 7,000 feet, the pressure is over 200 atmospheres. The nitrogen in your blood, the air spaces in your lungs and sinuses, and the cellular structure of your tissue would all behave catastrophically under those conditions if you were not built for it. The Greenland shark's body is. It has no swim bladder, the gas-filled organ most bony fish use to control buoyancy, which would collapse at depth anyway. Its cartilage skeleton flexes under pressure rather than cracking. Its cells are loaded with those trimethylamine oxide compounds we discussed earlier, which stabilize proteins against the pressure-induced misfolding that would destroy other animals' cellular machinery. The shark is essentially pressure-proofed at the molecular level. Every major system has adapted not just to cold, but to the specific mechanical stress of extreme depth. This is not one adaptation. It is dozens of them, layered over millions of years of evolution, all pointing toward the same goal: function in conditions that should be impossible for large complex life. What makes the depth even more interesting is the behaviour scientists have observed there. Greenland sharks at extreme depth do not appear stressed or erratic. They move with the same slow, deliberate pace recorded in shallower Arctic waters. They appear to be in their element, hunting, drifting, doing what they have always done, just further down. Some tagging data shows individuals making what appear to be regular vertical migrations, ascending to shallower depths at certain times and descending again. The reason is not fully understood. It may be tied to prey availability, as certain fish species move up and down the water column on their own schedules. It may be tied to temperature preferences that shift with season. It may be something else entirely that scientists have not yet identified. What is certain is that the Greenland shark moves through more of the ocean's vertical range than almost any other large shark species. It is comfortable at the surface. It is comfortable near the seafloor at crushing depth. The entire water column from wave to abyss appears to be within its range. And somewhere in all of that space, in the cold dark between 7,000 feet and the surface, lives an animal that may be 500 years old, an animal that has survived depth, pressure, darkness, parasites, and centuries of change. What happens when the water around it starts to change in ways it has never experienced before? That question is coming, but first, something even stranger about what scientists found inside its genetics. In 2023, a research team published something that made biologists sit up straight. They had sequenced the full genome of the Greenland shark, mapping out its complete genetic code for the first time. The genome is enormous, over 6 times larger than the human genome, making it one of the biggest animal genomes ever recorded. But size was not the surprise. The surprise was what they found when they looked at the DNA carefully. Specifically, when they looked at the rate of change in that DNA over time. All living things accumulate small errors in their genetic code as they age and reproduce. These errors are called mutations. Some mutations are neutral, some are harmful, and a very rare few are beneficial. Over long time spans, the accumulation of mutations is how species evolve. But at the individual level, mutations are also a marker of cellular aging and DNA damage. Greenland sharks showed a mutation rate so low, it was almost anomalous. Their genetic code was changing far more slowly than expected for any vertebrate of their size. The level of DNA damage typically associated with aging was dramatically reduced compared to other long-lived animals like whales or turtles. Scientists believe several factors drive this. The cold environment slows chemical reactions that normally damage DNA. The shark's extremely low metabolism reduces the byproducts of energy production that are known to cause genetic damage. And the shark appears to have highly active DNA repair systems, molecular machinery that catches and fixes errors in the genetic code before they accumulate. This combination, slow mutation, cold environment, active repair, creates a genetic system that ages much more slowly than anything scientists had previously measured in a wild vertebrate. The genome also revealed details about genes related to aging directly. In humans and most mammals, certain genetic pathways regulate how quickly cells age, how well the body repairs itself, and how the immune system handles long-term stress. In the Greenland shark's genome, these pathways showed distinct differences from other vertebrates. Some genes involved in DNA repair appear in expanded or modified forms, suggesting the shark has invested heavily, at the genetic level, in maintenance over a very long time. What researchers are cautious about is overinterpreting this data. Finding a gene variant associated with longevity in a shark does not automatically mean it works the same way in mammals. Evolution finds different solutions in different lineages. A genetic trick that keeps a shark alive for 5 centuries may not translate directly into a treatment for human aging, but it opens a door. It tells scientists where to look. If you want to understand why some bodies outlast others, study the one that outlasts everything. The Greenland shark genome gave researchers a map of biological longevity unlike any they had seen before. What they do with that map and how far it reaches into human medicine is one of the more interesting open questions in biology right now. But genes only explain part of the story. The animal's actual life, how it behaves, where it goes, who it finds, is still largely invisible to science, especially the parts that matter most for its survival as a species. For most of the 20th century, Greenland sharks were treated as a nuisance. Commercial fishing fleets operating across the North Atlantic hauled them up by the thousands as bycatch, trapped in nets meant for cod, halibut and other commercially valuable species. Fishermen would cut the sharks loose or toss them back, often dead or dying. Some operations specifically targeted Greenland sharks for their livers, which are extremely large and rich in oils used in industrial lubricants before synthetic alternatives became available. Nobody counted how many were killed. Nobody tracked the population. Nobody considered whether removing thousands of these animals per year from an ocean had any long-term consequence. We now know what those consequences look like. A species where females take 150 years to reach maturity cannot absorb heavy extraction pressure. Every female killed before she reaches reproductive age represents a loss that cannot be replaced for a century and a half. If a population drops significantly, recovery is not measured in years or even decades. It is measured in lifetimes, multiple human lifetimes, of zero interference and perfect conditions. The current global population of Greenland sharks is genuinely unknown. Scientists have tried to estimate numbers using survey data, tagging return rates, and camera deployments in known habitat zones. The estimates vary widely and carry significant uncertainty. Some researchers suggest the population is in the tens of thousands. Others think it could be higher, given the vast unexplored deep water habitat the sharks occupy. What is clear is that the species is listed as vulnerable on the International Union for Conservation of Nature Red List. Vulnerable means the population has declined enough that the risk of further decline is real and documented. It sits one category below endangered. The challenge of protecting Greenland sharks runs directly into the challenge of monitoring them. They live in some of the most remote, difficult to access ocean environments on Earth. They spend most of their time at depths that require expensive, specialized equipment to reach. They move across international waters, meaning no single country's regulations fully govern their fate. Some management measures are in place. Several countries have banned direct targeting of Greenland sharks in their exclusive economic zones. Bycatch reporting requirements exist in some fisheries, but enforcement in the deep remote North Atlantic is difficult, and the data needed to manage a population you cannot count is inherently limited. The scientific community has pushed for expanded protections, but the policy response has been slow. Managing a species on a 500-year timescale does not fit neatly into the annual budget cycles and 4-year political terms that govern most conservation decisions. What is strange and quietly urgent about this situation is the following. An animal that may carry biological secrets relevant to human aging, an animal that has survived for millions of years in one of Earth's harshest environments, an animal that represents an extreme of vertebrate life we're only beginning to understand, is losing population at a rate its reproductive biology cannot compensate for. The clock the shark has been running on for 500 years is fine. The clock imposed on it by human activity is a different matter entirely, and understanding what is actually at stake requires knowing what the shark's body might one day mean for people who are not sharks at all. Aging is one of the oldest unsolved problems in biology. Every complex organism ages, everyone eventually dies. For centuries, scientists assumed aging was simply wear and tear, a body breaking down over time the way a machine does. Wind it up, run it, eventually it stops. That picture was always incomplete. And the Greenland shark is one of the clearest pieces of evidence that aging is far more flexible than it appears. The shark's body does not just slow down aging accidentally. It does so through multiple layered systems working together. Cold temperature, low metabolism, active DNA repair, chemical stabilizers in its cells, reduced cardiovascular stress, genetic variants in aging pathways. Every one of those factors contributes, and every one of them points to a biological principle. Aging is a rate, not a destination. You can change the rate. In human medicine, this matters enormously. Aging is the primary risk factor for almost every major disease that kills people in developed countries. Heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's disease, stroke, they all increase in frequency and severity as the body ages. If the mechanisms of aging can be slowed, even slightly, the downstream effect on disease rates would be enormous. Research teams at universities in Europe and North America have already begun studying the specific genetic variants found in the Greenland shark genome. They are looking for analogues in mammalian biology, similar genes or pathways that could be targeted to extend healthy cell function in humans. The trimethylamine oxide compounds the shark uses to stabilize proteins under pressure, and cold have also attracted attention. Some researchers are exploring whether similar stabilizing compounds could be developed to protect proteins in aging human cells, which also show misfolding problems over time, just through different mechanisms. This is early-stage research. The distance between finding an interesting gene in a shark and producing a drug that extends healthy human life is enormous, measured in decades of trials, failures, and refinements. Scientists are not claiming they have found a fountain of youth inside a Greenland shark. They are claiming they have found something worth studying very carefully. What makes the shark uniquely valuable as a study subject is the scale of its longevity, combined with the fact that it is a vertebrate. Many long-lived organisms are invertebrates, meaning they are built very differently from animals with a backbone. Insights from their biology are harder to translate to vertebrate medicine. The Greenland shark shares fundamental biology with humans in ways that a sea sponge or a jellyfish does not. Its genome, its cellular chemistry, its cardiovascular design, all of these exist on a continuum with human biology, just pushed to a place human biology has never reached. Understanding how it got there is the work of the next generation of researchers, and they will do that work against a backdrop of urgency, because the ocean the Greenland shark has called home for hundreds of millions of years is changing faster than at any point in its recorded history. The Greenland shark evolved for cold. Every cell in its body is tuned for it. Its proteins are stabilized for near-freezing temperatures. Its enzymes are calibrated to function in cold. Its metabolism is built around the assumption that the water it swims in will stay at or near the temperature of a refrigerator. That assumption has held for millions of years. It is beginning to fail. Ocean temperatures in the Arctic have risen faster than almost anywhere else on Earth over the past several decades. The Arctic Ocean is warming at roughly 4 times the global average rate. What was once stable, cold, dark water is now shifting. Seasonal ice coverage has reduced dramatically. Deep water mixing patterns are changing. The thermal structure of the ocean, the way cold and warm layers stack on top of each other, is reorganizing in ways that affect every animal that depends on a specific temperature zone. For the Greenland shark, the primary concern is not surface warming, which the shark largely avoids by staying deep. The concern is the slow warming of deep water itself, which happens on longer timescales but is already measurable in some zones. Scientists studying Greenland shark behavior have noticed what appear to be range shifts in recent years. Some population surveys suggest the sharks are spending more time at greater depth than previously recorded, possibly tracking the retreating cold water layer as it sinks further. Others have detected increased detections in areas that were previously outside the shark's documented range, possibly searching for suitable temperature zones. One research group studying sharks tagged in Canadian Arctic waters found that several individuals spent unusually long periods in what appeared to be thermal stress conditions, water temperatures higher than the shark's optimal range. The sharks did not die from this exposure, but their behavior changed. Movement became erratic. Time spent in preferred cold zones increased after each excursion into warmer water, as if the animal was actively recovering. A 500-year-old animal recovering from thermal stress is a strange thing to consider. It has never needed to before. Its entire evolutionary history was written in cold. The instruction manual it carries in its genes was written for a world that is disappearing. The reproductive implication is particularly severe. If warming conditions push the shark's preferred habitat into smaller, deeper, or more fragmented zones, individuals may have more difficulty finding mates. A species that already reproduces at an incredibly slow rate, with females waiting 150 years between juvenile and adult, cannot afford additional pressure on successful breeding. There are no documented cases of Greenland shark populations collapsing due to warming. The data is too limited, and the species too difficult to monitor for that kind of assessment. What exists is a strong mechanistic argument. An animal this perfectly adapted to cold, on a reproductive timeline this long, with a population this uncertain, faces a combination of pressures that its evolutionary history gave it no preparation for. The ocean it has survived in for hundreds of millions of years is becoming something new, and the shark, for all its extraordinary biological resilience, is not built to adapt quickly. What comes next in this story pushes further, because beyond the warming problem lies a question that goes to the edge of what we understand about life itself. No scientist has ever seen a Greenland shark give birth. No scientist has ever observed two Greenland sharks mating. For the oldest known vertebrate on Earth, the most fundamental act of survival as a species has never been directly witnessed by any researcher with a camera or a sensor in the water. Everything known about Greenland shark reproduction comes from inference, from dissecting pregnant females caught as bycatch, from examining pup size and structure, from comparing to what we know about other shark species. Here is what that indirect evidence tells us. Female Greenland sharks appear to give birth to live pups, a reproductive mode called ovoviviparity. The eggs develop and hatch inside the mother's body, and the pups are born fully formed. Litter sizes appear to be relatively small, estimated at somewhere between 8 and 10 pups per pregnancy, based on the number of pups found in dissected pregnant females. The pups are born at around 15 inches long, which sounds reasonable until you remember that a fully grown Greenland shark reaches over 20 feet. Those 15 inches represent the starting point of a journey measured not in years but in centuries. What nobody knows is how often a female reproduces. Does she give birth every few years? Every decade? Every few decades? The answer has significant implications for understanding how fast the species can replace individuals lost to fishing or environmental change. If a female produces a litter every 5 years after reaching maturity, the math of population recovery looks different than if she breeds only every 20 or 30 years. Nobody knows the gestation period either. How long does a pregnant female carry her pups before giving birth? For sharks of similar reproductive mode in other species, gestation ranges from less than a year to nearly 2 years. For a species where everything else runs on century-long timescales, a 2-year gestation seems almost rushed. The location of birth is also unknown. Scientists have found very small juvenile Greenland sharks in deep fjords along the Norwegian coast and in certain areas of Arctic Canada, suggesting these may be nursery zones. But whether females actively migrate to these areas to give birth, or whether juveniles simply concentrate there for reasons of temperature or prey, remains unclear. The mating system is completely opaque. Sharks in general use internal fertilization, where the male uses specialized fins called claspers to transfer sperm to the female. In some shark species, females carry sperm from multiple males and can control fertilization timing. Whether Greenland sharks do the same is unknown. Whether they pair bond, gather in groups for mating, or seek each other out across hundreds of miles of open ocean is unknown. We have sequenced this animal's entire genome. We have tracked individuals across 1,700 miles of ocean. We have used nuclear bomb test residue to determine its age to within a few decades, and we have never once seen it reproduce. The most intimate part of its life remains completely invisible. Scientists hope that advances in deep-sea camera technology and long-duration autonomous underwater vehicles will eventually capture what has never been seen. Until then, the Greenland shark keeps this secret the way it keeps all its secrets. In the dark, at depth, far from the surface world above. Here is where all of it converges. The age estimates from the radiocarbon study gave a confirmed minimum of 392 years for the largest female measured. The upper bound of the confidence interval stretched to 512 years. Scientists describe that upper range as possible, but uncertain, requiring larger body sizes or additional data to confirm. The largest Greenland sharks ever recorded reach over 21 feet. The individual measured in the aging study was 13 feet. If the relationship between body length and age holds at the upper end of the size range, then a 21-foot shark could be far older than 500 years. The math does not stop at 500. It keeps going. Some researchers have begun discussing the possibility, carefully and with appropriate scientific caution, that the maximum lifespan of the Greenland shark may not be 500 years. It may be 600. It may be more. Nobody has measured a 21-foot individual with the radiocarbon method. Nobody has yet found the oldest living Greenland shark. We have only found old ones. Right now, as you listen to this, somewhere in the deep, dark water of the North Atlantic or the Arctic Ocean, there is almost certainly a Greenland shark alive that has not been found, tagged, or measured by any scientist. Based on what we know about size distribution and population estimates, some of those unexamined animals are large, very large. A 20-foot Greenland shark, based on current growth rate estimates, would be somewhere in the range of 350 to 500 years old. A 21-foot individual could push past that. The oldest living vertebrate on Earth right now is almost certainly a Greenland shark, and we have absolutely no idea which one it is, where it is, or how old it actually is. That animal was alive during events we read about in history books. It was swimming when the first European settlements appeared in North America. It was swimming during the Industrial Revolution. It was swimming when humans first flew. It is swimming now in complete darkness, at crushing depth, following the same slow current it has always followed. Its biology has kept it alive through conditions that killed almost everything else around it. Its slow metabolism, its cold stabilized proteins, its active DNA repair, its chemical armor, its extraordinary sensory system, all of it has compounded over centuries into a body that simply keeps running. And what makes this animal more than just a biological curiosity is exactly that question of what running for 500 years actually means. Every cell in a 500-year-old body has been repaired, maintained, and kept functional across an expanse of time that covers most of recorded human civilization. If science can understand how, the implications reach far beyond sharks. They reach into every hospital, every aging research centre, every conversation about what is actually possible for a living body under the right conditions. The Greenland shark did not set out to answer humanity's questions about aging. It set out to survive, and it has been surviving in the dark longer than we thought possible. We were wrong about its age. The question now is what else we're wrong about. Long before scientists cared about the Greenland shark's age, fishermen cared about its liver. The Greenland shark has one of the largest livers relative to body size of any shark on Earth. In a large adult, the liver can account for roughly a quarter of the animal's total body weight. On a 2,000-pound shark, that is 500 pounds of liver. The organ fills a significant portion of the body cavity, running nearly the full length of the torso. That liver is packed with oil, specifically a compound called squalene, along with other lipid-rich substances that made the oil extremely valuable in the industrial era, before synthetic alternatives existed. Shark liver oil served as a high-performance lubricant for machinery. It was used in watchmaking, in precision instruments, in the gearboxes of industrial equipment, and in the lamps that lit buildings across coastal communities. Unlike most oils of the era, shark liver oil did not thicken in cold temperatures, which made it ideal for machinery operating in northern climates. The Greenland shark, living in accessible Arctic waters, became a target. Norwegian and Icelandic fishing operations began hunting them systematically in the late 1800s. By the early 20th century, the harvest had scaled dramatically. estimates suggest that during the peak decades of the industry, spanning roughly the 1920s through the 1950s, hundreds of thousands of Greenland sharks were killed for their liver oil. Hundreds of thousands. And nobody was counting ages. Nobody was measuring lengths and recording them carefully. Nobody connected the massive grey animal hauled up in a net to the possibility that it might have been alive longer than anyone on the boat's captain, the boat captain's grandfather, and everyone they had ever known combined. The industry wound down after World War II as synthetic lubricants replaced animal oils in most industrial applications. The hunting pressure dropped, but the damage accumulated over those decades had removed an unknown number of large, reproductively mature females from the population. Animals that had spent a century and a half reaching adulthood, killed before producing a single pup, for a product now replaced by something made in a factory. What remained after the industry collapse was a population of unknown size, with an unknown age structure, recovering at an unknown rate, in waters that nobody was closely monitoring. The Greenland shark survived the liver oil industry. Its biology made it resilient enough to absorb even that level of pressure, at least partially. But the cost in lost centuries of reproductive potential across the population is something science cannot fully calculate because the data from that era barely exists. What the industry left behind, beyond depleted numbers, was a different kind of damage. It left a legacy of indifference. For generations after, the Greenland shark was still treated as an afterthought in North Atlantic fisheries management, a nuisance in the net, something to cut loose and forget. That attitude persisted until the radiocarbon study made it impossible to ignore any longer. Because once you know what you're actually cutting loose, the calculation changes entirely. And what came after that study, the scramble to understand a species we had been accidentally destroying for a century, revealed something scientists had completely missed about where these animals actually live. Small Greenland sharks show up in places the big ones rarely go. Along the deep fjords of Norway, and in certain sheltered bays off Arctic Canada and Greenland, researchers began noticing juvenile sharks in numbers that surprised them. These young animals, ranging from about 15 inches to a few feet long, appeared to concentrate in specific locations repeatedly across different survey years, the same fjords, the same depth ranges, the same temperature bands. Scientists began calling these areas potential nursery zones. The idea is that newly born pups and young juveniles use these sheltered, food-rich, relatively shallow environments as a protected starting point before moving out into deeper and more exposed open ocean as they grow. This pattern appears in many shark species. The young need somewhere safe to begin. What makes the Greenland shark nursery situation unusual is the timescale attached to it. A juvenile Greenland shark is not spending a few months in a nursery before graduating to adult habitat. It may be spending decades there. A shark found in a Norwegian fjord at 3 feet long might be 20 or 30 years old already. Still a young animal by any biological measure of this species, but already older than most large mammals ever get. The nursery zones carry an immediate conservation implication. Protecting these specific geographic areas is disproportionately important for the species. Damage to a nursery zone does not just remove individual sharks. It removes the entire starting pipeline of a population, the animals that will eventually reach reproductive age a century and a half from now. Industrial activity, pollution runoff, and warming in fjord systems all represent threats to these zones. Several of the Norwegian fjords, where juvenile Greenland sharks have been recorded, also experience seasonal tourism pressure, aquaculture operations, and occasional shipping traffic. The depth the sharks prefer in these zones, typically several hundred feet down, provides some buffer. But the water quality and thermal structure of fjord environments are closely tied to conditions at the surface. Some of the juvenile sharks recorded in these nursery zones have been fitted with small acoustic tags that ping receivers placed on the fjord floor. The data coming back shows remarkable site fidelity. Individual sharks returning to the exact same areas of the fjord repeatedly over months and years. They are not just passing through, they are residents, learning a specific environment, building a behavioural map of a place they may call home for decades before their biology drives them out into the open ocean. When a tagged juvenile eventually leaves the fjord, the acoustic record simply goes silent. The receiver network does not extend beyond the fjord entrance. Where the shark goes next, what route it takes, what drives the timing of its departure are all unanswered. The animal simply disappears into the broader ocean and joins the thousands of other Greenland sharks moving through water that no sensor array on Earth can fully cover. But what scientists found when they did manage to track adults far out in the open ocean contradicted almost every assumption about how predictable a 500-year-old animal's behaviour might be. When researchers first began fitting adult Greenland sharks with satellite-linked pop-up tags in the early 2000s, they expected to find animals that stayed close to known Arctic habitat. They were wrong. One of the earliest tagged individuals, a large shark caught and released off the coast of Greenland, surfaced its tag in the waters off the British Isles nearly a year later. The straight-line distance between the release point and the tag surfacing location was over 2,000 miles. The actual route the shark swam, following currents and hunting opportunities, was almost certainly longer. 2,000 miles. At a top speed of roughly 1.5 miles per hour, swimming continuously, that journey would take most of a year just in transit time. The shark was doing more than transiting. It was stopping, hunting, resting, exploring habitat along the way. This movement pattern, confirmed across multiple tagged individuals from different research groups, revealed that the Greenland shark lives an oceanic life on a scale nobody had expected. The North Atlantic is its territory. The Arctic to the south is its range. The deep water connecting these regions is its highway. What drives these journeys is not fully understood. Some researchers believe the movements follow prey distributions, chasing concentrations of fish and marine mammals that shift across the ocean with seasons and currents. Others suggest the movements may be related to reproduction, animals travelling large distances to reach zones where mating occurs. Since mating has never been observed, this remains a hypothesis built on spatial data alone. One particularly detailed tracking study followed a female across the western North Atlantic for over 16 months. Her movements showed a pattern that stunned the research team. She descended to extreme depths during daylight hours, sometimes exceeding 6,000 feet, and ascended to shallower water at night. She crossed temperature gradients that most cold water specialists would avoid. She moved through areas where water temperatures exceeded her apparent comfort range and kept going. At one point in her journey, she spent several weeks in an area of the deep Atlantic with almost no recorded Greenland shark activity in prior surveys. She was essentially alone, in deep, unfamiliar water, thousands of miles from where she started. Then she turned around and headed back north. Scientists cannot explain the purpose of that excursion with certainty. The area she visited held no obvious prey advantage they could identify. The temperature was higher than ideal. She gained nothing obvious from the journey and appeared to spend energy on it that her slow metabolism could ill afford to waste, unless she was not looking for food, unless the journey itself served a purpose related to something the science has not yet captured. Finding a mate, navigating a biological calendar that runs on a timescale humans cannot follow, responding to ocean signals, temperature gradients, chemical traces in the water that researchers have not yet learned to read. The Greenland shark moved through the ocean with a logic that 500 years of lived experience had built, and the researchers watching on satellite could only track the shape of it, not the meaning. What came next in the investigation moved from tracking individual animals to asking a question about the entire species, a question about what was waiting in the deepest, most unexplored corners of the ocean. The deep ocean is the largest habitat on Earth and the least explored. Below 3,000 feet, sunlight is completely absent. The pressure is immense. The temperature hovers near freezing. For decades, scientists assumed that large, complex animals were rare in these conditions. The deep ocean was thought to be a sparse, quiet place, home mostly to small invertebrates and the occasional strange fish adapted to near-starvation conditions. The Greenland shark forced a revision of that assumption. When researchers began deploying deep-sea lander cameras, unmanned platforms equipped with bait and cameras that sink to extreme depths and record whatever shows up, Greenland sharks appeared far more frequently than anyone had predicted. At depths of 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 feet, in water that humans had never directly observed, Greenland sharks arrived at the bait within hours. The speed of their arrival was itself surprising. An animal moving at 1/3 of a mile per hour should take a long time to reach a bait source. But the sharks appeared quickly enough that researchers concluded they must have been in the general area already, not travelling from far away. The deep abyss, it turned out, was not empty. It was populated by animals that had never been counted because nobody had looked properly. One deep-sea survey off the coast of Greenland recorded 17 individual Greenland sharks visiting a single camera lander at depths between 4,000 and 5,000 feet over a monitoring period of roughly 4 days. 17 animals in an area of ocean that most maps describe simply as deep water, with no annotation about what lives there. The implication is significant. If Greenland shark density in deep water even approaches what these localized surveys suggest, the total global population may be much larger than existing estimates based on surface and near-surface survey methods. The animals have been hiding in plain sight, or rather in complete darkness, in a habitat that human monitoring systems were not designed to reach. This also changes the conservation picture in complicated ways. A larger population is, in principle, better news for the species' survival. But a population dispersed across millions of square miles of deep ocean in international waters at depths that make any management or monitoring enormously expensive is nearly impossible to protect through conventional fisheries regulations. How do you set a catch limit for animals you cannot count? How do you enforce a bycatch restriction when the fishing gear descends to depths where observers cannot follow? These questions do not have good answers yet, and the organisations responsible for managing North Atlantic fisheries have been slow to develop frameworks designed specifically for abyssal species. Meanwhile, deep-sea trawling, a practice where enormous weighted nets are dragged along the seafloor to capture bottom-dwelling species, reaches depths where Greenland sharks are now known to live. These trawls are not targeting Greenland sharks, but incidental capture happens. At the reproductive timescale of this species, incidental capture at scale is a serious problem. What happens in the abyss? What swims there? How old it is? And how human activity reaches it even at 7,000 feet matters more than most people realise. And the Greenland shark sits at the centre of that question. The oldest vertebrate known to science, living in the most ignored habitat on Earth. But the story of where it lives opens into something even more strange. Because researchers tracking this species discovered they had to completely rethink the boundaries of where a cold water Arctic shark was allowed to exist. In 2015, a research team working in the deep waters of the Caribbean Sea pulled footage from an underwater camera and saw something that did not belong there. A Greenland shark. Grey, slow-moving, unmistakable, swimming in tropical water thousands of miles from its supposed Arctic home. The Caribbean Sea, famous for warm, clear, shallow water and coral reefs, is about as far from the Greenland shark's known habitat as you can get while staying in the Atlantic Ocean. The team checked the footage twice. They checked their identification. They were correct. The shark was at depth, roughly 2,600 feet below the surface, where the water temperature drops dramatically regardless of what the surface above it feels like. In the deep Caribbean, cold, dense water sinks and pools at the bottom of the basin, creating pockets of near-Arctic conditions hidden beneath the warm tropical sea above. The Greenland shark had found them. This discovery triggered a reassessment of the species' entire known range. If they were in the deep Caribbean, where else might they be that nobody had looked? Scientists began reviewing historical deep-sea camera footage from tropical Atlantic surveys, footage that had been archived without anyone specifically looking for Greenland sharks in it. They found additional sightings, Gulf of Mexico, waters off the Azores, deep Atlantic zones along the equatorial belt. The Greenland shark, it turned out, is a pan-Atlantic species. Its range covers the entire ocean basin from the Canadian Arctic in the northwest to the equatorial Atlantic in the south, wherever cold, deep water provides the thermal conditions it requires. The species is not limited to the Arctic. The Arctic is simply where those conditions exist at accessible depths. This has important implications for understanding the species' resilience. A population distributed across the entire Atlantic basin is less vulnerable to localized threats than one confined to a single region. If conditions deteriorate in one area, individuals can potentially find suitable habitat elsewhere. But the Caribbean sighting also raised a troubling question about temperature tolerance. The Greenland shark, found in Caribbean deep water, was surviving in conditions slightly warmer than its preferred Arctic habitat. Exactly how much thermal stress it was experiencing is unknown. Whether it was there by choice or by necessity, following prey into unfamiliar water, is also unknown. The shark appeared healthy on camera, moving with the same slow, deliberate pace, responding to the bait placed near the camera, functioning. But functioning in a thermal environment its biology was not specifically optimized for. As ocean temperatures rise in the cold deep-water pockets, the shark relies on shrink or shift. The Caribbean discovery goes from being a fascinating anomaly to a possible preview. If the Arctic cold zones compress, deeper populations may increasingly resemble what was found in the Caribbean. Animals pushing the edge of their thermal envelope, surviving in conditions that are workable for now, but leave less margin for error. The Greenland shark survived the journey from the Arctic to the tropics. Whether it can survive the tropics moving into the Arctic is a different question entirely, and it connects to something in the shark's genetic history that rewrites the story of how long this species has been doing the impossible. The Greenland shark belongs to an ancient lineage. Sharks as a group have existed on Earth for roughly 450 million years. They were swimming in the oceans before trees existed. They were alive before the first reptiles crawled onto land. 5 mass extinctions have reshaped life on Earth, events that wiped out the majority of species alive at the time, and sharks survived all of them. The specific family that includes the Greenland shark, the sleeper sharks, is ancient within that already ancient group. Fossil evidence suggests sleeper sharks have maintained roughly similar body plans for tens of millions of years. The slow, deep, cold, adapted body design the Greenland shark carries today is a design that has been tested against every catastrophe Earth has thrown at the ocean and passed every time. This context matters when thinking about the climate threat the shark faces now. The species has survived ice ages, during which ocean temperatures and chemistry changed dramatically over thousands of years. It has survived warming periods between ice ages. It has survived volcanic events that acidified ocean water. 450 million years of survival is not luck. It is biological robustness built across geological time. But there is a difference between the changes the species has survived before and what is happening now. Previous climate shifts happened over thousands to tens of thousands of years. That is slow enough for evolution to respond, for individuals with slight genetic advantages in changed conditions to reproduce more successfully, and for the population to gradually adapt. The current warming of the Arctic is happening on a scale of decades. Decades is not enough time for evolution to act on a species where females take 150 years to reach reproductive maturity. The genetic toolkit the Greenland shark carries was built for a different speed of change. The species survived ice ages because the ice ages gave it time. The question facing the Greenland shark today is whether the speed of current change outpaces even the most extreme biological resilience in the vertebrate world. Scientists working on shark conservation frame this carefully. The Greenland shark is likely to survive in some form. The question is whether the population will maintain the size and distribution needed to continue filling its ecological role and to eventually yield the biological insights that human medicine is beginning to reach for. A smaller, more fragmented, thermally stressed population of Greenland sharks is still a surviving species, but it is a diminished library. Every individual that does not live to 500 years, every female killed before she reaches 150, every ancient animal removed from the population before science can study it, represents a loss of something irreplaceable. 450 million years of biology, compressed into individual animals we barely understand, and the most extreme member of that lineage, the one that lives longest, dives deepest, and carries the most extraordinary cellular chemistry, is the one we knew the least about until a few years ago. What scientists found when they looked at the immune system of this animal added another layer to an already extraordinary picture. Staying alive for 500 years requires more than a slow metabolism and cold, stabilized proteins. It requires an immune system that keeps working. Every vertebrate body faces constant attack. Bacteria, viruses, parasites, and rogue cells that could become cancer are present throughout the life of any complex animal. The immune system is the defense network that identifies and eliminates these threats. In most animals, including humans, immune function declines with age. This decline is one of the primary reasons that older animals and older people are far more vulnerable to infections and certain diseases than younger ones. The Greenland shark appears to maintain effective immune function across its extraordinary lifespan. Scientists infer this partly from what they do not find. Animals with severely compromised immune systems typically show signs of systemic infection, tumours, or tissue damage visible even in external examinations. In the Greenland sharks examined by researchers, these signs are largely absent despite the animal's extreme age. The clearest evidence is the eye parasite itself. The copepod attached to the cornea represents a constant immunological challenge. It is a foreign organism feeding on living tissue, exactly the kind of threat the immune system is designed to identify and respond to. The shark does not eliminate the parasite, but it also does not develop the runaway inflammatory responses or secondary infections that would typically follow sustained tissue damage in a compromised animal. Something is managing the immune response, keeping inflammation controlled, preventing secondary infection, maintaining a biological equilibrium that allows the shark to live with the parasite for decades without the wound site becoming a fatal vulnerability. Researchers examining shark immune tissues have found what appear to be robust populations of immune cells in animals across a wide age range. The cellular machinery for identifying threats and mounting a response does not show the same signs of exhaustion or decline observed in aging mammals. This suggests the shark's immune system has maintenance mechanisms, ways of regenerating and sustaining immune function over time that are more effective than what most vertebrates possess. One area of particular interest is the shark's relationship with cancer. Long-lived animals that maintain rapid cell division over extended periods face elevated cancer risk. More cell divisions mean more opportunities for copying errors that can turn a normal cell into a dangerous one. In humans, cancer risk rises sharply with age precisely because of this accumulation of cellular errors over decades. The Greenland shark divides cells slowly, which reduces the raw number of copying opportunities. Its active DNA repair systems catch errors that do occur, and its immune surveillance system appears to identify and eliminate aberrant cells efficiently even in very old animals. Scientists have not recorded a cancer-free certification for Greenland sharks because internal examination of wild animals is limited mostly to those caught accidentally. But the available data from dissected individuals shows rates of obvious tumour formation far lower than would be expected in a mammal of comparable age. The immune system of the Greenland shark is not just keeping the animal alive, it appears to be doing so without the slow erosion that turns aging into a medical emergency for most vertebrates. Understanding the molecular details of how it manages this is one of the more active research questions in comparative immunology right now. Because if those mechanisms can be identified and understood, the applications to human immune aging could be profound. At 6,000 feet below the surface, the Greenland shark navigates a world that has no equivalent in human experience. Pressure so high it would crush an unprotected person instantly. Temperature just above freezing, absolute darkness in every direction. Sound travels differently, pressure waves moving through water instead of air, carrying information across miles that would be blocked in seconds above the surface. The chemical composition of the water carries traces of every living thing that has moved through it for days. The Greenland shark reads all of it. Its lateral line system, the network of pressure-sensing cells running from head to tail, detects displacement in the water with extraordinary sensitivity. An animal moving at a distance creates a pressure wave. The lateral line reads that wave and maps its source, giving the shark a spatial sense of objects and creatures around it without any visual information at all. The ampullae of Lorenzini, those jelly-filled electroreceptive pores in the shark's snout, detect the bioelectrical fields generated by living muscle. At depth, where bioluminescence from small organisms creates brief flickers of cold blue-green light but no useful illumination, this electrical sense becomes the primary hunting tool. A seal resting on the seafloor, a fish hovering motionless in the water column, a crustacean buried in sediment, all of them generate electrical fields the Greenland shark can detect. The range of electroreception in sharks is estimated at up to a few feet in ideal conditions. This sounds short until you realise that when an animal is invisible, silent, and generating almost no water displacement, the final approach to within electrical detection range is already close enough. The shark moves so slowly it creates minimal pressure disturbance. It arrives at prey's electrical range before the prey knows it is there. Smell operates at the longest range. The olfactory system in the Greenland shark is proportionally large, taking up significant brain real estate compared to the diminished visual processing areas. Chemical traces in the water, blood from a distant wound, decomposition from a carcass, the characteristic chemical signature of a particular prey species persist in water far longer than they would in air. An injured seal leaving a blood trace at the surface will have that chemical signal sink and disperse through the water column over hours. The Greenland shark, moving through that column at a lower depth, can detect the signal and orient toward it from a distance of potentially hundreds of yards, depending on currents and concentration. Together, these systems create a sensory picture of the world that is genuinely alien from a human perspective. We understand the world primarily through sight. The Greenland shark understands it through pressure, electricity, and chemistry. It builds a map of its environment from forces and signals we cannot perceive without instruments. What this means for a 500-year-old animal is profound. Over centuries of navigating the deep Atlantic, a Greenland shark develops a sensory history of its territory that no young animal possesses. It has tracked the chemical signature of prey populations through decades of seasonal change. It has felt the pressure patterns of specific deep water currents against its lateral line across centuries of variation. The oldest living Greenland sharks carry a sensory memory of the ocean that stretches back further than any data set any human oceanographer has ever collected. They have been measuring the deep Atlantic longer than we have. Stand back from the biology for a moment and consider the human history this animal has witnessed from below. A Greenland shark alive today at 400 years has been swimming since before the founding of any current government on Earth. It was in the water when the 30 Years' War reshaped Europe, when Isaac Newton published his laws of motion, when the first steam engines began to run, when the telephone was invented, when the first nuclear bomb was detonated above the Marshall Islands, seeding the ocean with the carbon signature scientists would later use to measure its age. Every major transformation of human civilization happened above the surface of an ocean this animal was already old in. From wooden sailing ships to nuclear submarines, from hand-drawn maps to satellite imagery, from no knowledge of this animal at all to sequencing its complete genome. The shark did not experience these changes. It registered them only in the ways the ocean itself changed, shifting chemistry, changing prey distributions, new sounds propagating through the water. The low-frequency hum of ship propellers is a new noise in an ocean that was quiet for the shark's first several centuries. The acoustic environment of the North Atlantic today is dramatically louder and more complex than what a shark born in 1620 would have known in its first century of life. Anthropogenic noise, sound generated by human activity, is now known to affect the behaviour of many marine species. Whales alter their migration routes to avoid shipping lanes. Fish communication is disrupted by engine noise. How the Greenland shark responds to this dramatically altered acoustic environment is poorly studied. Its primary sensory systems do not rely on hearing the way some marine mammals do, but pressure waves generated by large vessels travelling at depth reach the ranges where Greenland sharks live, and the long-term behavioural effects of that exposure across centuries of increasing ocean noise have never been examined. The shark's ocean has changed in other ways too. Chemical pollution, including industrial runoff, plastics at depth, and changes in ocean chemistry driven by absorbed carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, represents a different kind of alteration to the environment the species evolved in. Some of these compounds accumulate in the fatty tissues of large predators over time. An animal eating prey near the top of a marine food web for 5 centuries is potentially accumulating chemical pollutants across an enormous time span. The full toxicological picture of what a 500-year-old Greenland shark's tissues contain today, compared to an animal of the same age from 200 years ago, is something science has not yet been able to examine. No archived tissue samples from pre-industrial Greenland sharks exist for comparison. What we can say is that the ocean this animal has lived in for 5 centuries is now measurably different from the ocean it was born into. Temperature, chemistry, noise, pollution, all changed in the direction of less suitable for an animal built for cold, quiet, clean, deep water, and still the sharks swim, carrying the weight of history in their biology, navigating a world that has been altered around them without their consent, doing what they have always done, surviving. When scientists finished mapping the Greenland shark genome in 2023, they found something that went beyond just confirming the shark was unusual. They found evidence of evolutionary investment in longevity stretching back millions of years. The genome contains expanded versions of gene families associated with DNA stability and repair. These are not just genes that happen to be present. They appear in more copies, and with more variation within those copies than in related shark species. More copies of a gene typically means the organism makes more of the protein that gene produces. More DNA repair proteins means more active maintenance of the genetic code. This pattern, expanded repair gene families in long-lived species, appears in other organisms too. Long-lived bat species show similar patterns. Certain long-lived rodent species called naked mole rats, which can live over 30 years despite being small mammals, show analogous genetic investments in cellular maintenance. The Greenland shark represents the most extreme vertebrate version of this pattern yet identified. The genome also revealed something about the shark's evolutionary history. Comparing the Greenland shark genome to related species allowed scientists to estimate when certain genetic changes that contribute to longevity were introduced into the lineage. Some appear ancient, shared across all sleeper sharks. Others appear more recently in the Greenland shark's specific evolutionary line, suggesting ongoing refinement of the longevity toolkit over millions of years. Evolution does not make decisions, it does not aim for outcomes, but selection pressure consistently removes individuals that die young from the gene pool and keeps individuals that live long enough to reproduce. In an environment as stable and cold as the deep Arctic, where generation times stretch to centuries, the mathematical pressure favouring longevity mechanisms is more sustained than in almost any other ecological context. The Greenland shark's genome is the record of millions of years of that selection pressure. It is a document written in DNA that says, in effect, the long game works. Every gene that helps a cell last a decade longer, every repair mechanism that catches one more mutation, every metabolic adjustment that reduces cellular wear, compounds across geological time into a body that lasts 5 centuries. Researchers studying the genome specifically for variants that might translate to human biology have identified several candidate genes in aging-related pathways. One group involves insulin and insulin-like growth factor signaling, a pathway known to regulate aging across many species including humans. Variants in this pathway in the Greenland shark differ from the human version in ways that appear to reduce the rate of age-related cellular change. Another group involves genes associated with mitochondrial function. Mitochondria are the structures inside cells that produce energy, and mitochondrial dysfunction is increasingly understood as a central driver of aging in vertebrates. The Greenland shark's mitochondrial-related genes show modifications that may make these structures more stable and less likely to generate the damaging byproducts associated with normal energy production in other species. These findings do not immediately translate to therapies, but they provide specific targets. They give researchers a biological address to investigate, and the address leads somewhere no one had looked before, deep inside the cellular machinery of the slowest, oldest, deepest fish ever studied by science. Long before scientists arrived with sampling tubes and satellite tags, the Inuit people of Greenland and the Canadian Arctic knew this shark intimately. They called it Ekaluswak, the big fish. For coastal communities living at the edge of the Arctic Ocean, the Greenland shark was a creature woven into daily life, not as something to be studied, but as something to be managed carefully and respected. Oral traditions passed down across generations describe the shark's behaviour, its territory, its habits, and its dangers. Indigenous hunters knew that the shark appeared reliably at certain times of year in specific locations. They knew it was drawn to the smell of seal carcasses and could be caught by leaving bait in the water on a line. They knew the meat was dangerous to eat raw, a fact likely learned through hard experience over many generations, and they developed the fermentation techniques needed to make it safe long before any chemist explained why the raw flesh was toxic. What indigenous knowledge preserved, often in remarkable detail, was a portrait of the shark's behaviour that matched what scientists are now confirming through expensive tagging programs. The shark's slow movement, its tendency to appear at depth near seal hunting grounds, its reliability in returning to the same areas across different seasons. Communities that depended on reading animal behaviour for survival were tracking the Greenland shark with a precision that did not require instruments. This knowledge took centuries to accumulate. The elders who understood the shark's patterns most deeply had been observing them and listening to the observations of those who came before for lifetimes. In a species where individual animals outlive the longest human lifespan by centuries, the community knowledge built up across generations of hunters represented a data set that overlapped meaningfully with the shark's own life histories. There is something striking about this parallel. Indigenous communities spending generations building behavioural knowledge of an animal that lives long enough to have been alive for those same generations. The elder hunters and the ancient sharks occupying the same timeline, one measured in human lives passing knowledge forward, the other measured in a single body continuing without interruption. Modern conservation science is increasingly turning to indigenous ecological knowledge as a resource. The detailed behavioural observations preserved in oral traditions about Greenland sharks in specific fjords and coastal zones fill gaps that no survey program has yet been able to cover with instrumental data. Where the sharks go in certain seasons, which areas they favour in specific conditions, how their presence relates to the movements of prey species the community also tracked. This knowledge exists. Efforts to formally document and integrate it into scientific frameworks are ongoing, though the pace has been slower than many indigenous communities and researchers would prefer. The collaboration between generations of traditional ecological knowledge and the tools of modern genomics and satellite tracking represents the most complete picture of the Greenland shark yet assembled. And that picture keeps revealing things that the scientific community, despite all its instruments, would never have found by looking alone. Science cannot answer this question, but it is worth asking. What does 5 centuries of continuous experience accumulate into? The Greenland shark has no language, no culture, no ability to reflect on its history in any way science can measure. Its brain is small relative to its body, organised around the sensory systems it uses to navigate and hunt, with less dedicated to the kind of processing associated with memory and learning in mammals, and yet animals learn. Even animals with relatively simple nervous systems adjust their behaviour based on experience. Sharks across many species show evidence of learned behaviour, recognising specific dive locations associated with food, avoiding areas where they have previously been caught, responding differently to stimuli they have encountered before versus novel ones. A Greenland shark, 500 years old, has been learning from experience for 500 years. Every prey encounter, every change in current, every chemical trace that preceded a successful hunt, every approach that resulted in escape versus capture has been registered somewhere in the neural architecture of an animal that never stops building its behavioural history. Scientists do not claim the Greenland shark has wisdom in any human sense, but the behavioural data from tagged individuals does show patterns consistent with experienced adaptive decision-making. The female that crossed the Atlantic and then turned back, the animals that consistently return to specific deep water zones across years of tracking data, the sharks that appear reliably near certain seasonal prey aggregations. These behaviours suggest, at minimum, that the animal builds and uses a spatial and temporal map of its world that improves over time. The ocean. The oldest Greenland sharks navigate is a place they have lived in longer than any human-built structure on Earth has stood. They have felt the currents shift. They have tracked the seasonal movement of prey through cycles none of us has witnessed the full length of. They move through the water with a confidence built from half a millennium of successful survival in one of the harshest environments on the planet. What would it mean to understand what that body has learned? To translate 5 centuries of oceanic experience into data that humans could read? The information encoded in a 500-year-old Greenland shark's behavioural patterns represents a record of ocean conditions across most of modern human history. Prey population shifts, current changes, temperature variations, all of it registered in the behavioural choices of an animal that has been there for all of it. Scientists tracking this species are beginning to think of long-lived individuals less as research subjects and more as living archives, ancient witnesses to oceanic history that no instrument was in place to record when they were young. And when you think of them that way, the urgency of protecting them shifts. It is no longer just about saving an endangered animal. It is about preserving a living record that exists nowhere else. A record that, unlike any written document, is still being actively updated, still swimming, still accumulating history in the deep dark below us. The Greenland shark's heart beats approximately once every 10 to 14 seconds under normal resting conditions. Put that next to a human heart, which beats roughly once per second, and the difference becomes physical. Your heart beats 86,000 times a day. The Greenland shark's heart beats somewhere around 6,000 to 8,000 times in the same period. In a year, your heart beats over 30 million times. The shark's heart beats roughly 2 to 3 million times. Across a 500-year lifespan, your heart would beat far over 10 billion times if it ran that long. The Greenland shark's heart, across the same 500 years, beats perhaps 1 to 1.5 billion times. That difference in mechanical stress on the cardiovascular system, spread across centuries, represents a fundamentally different relationship between the heart and the passage of time. Cardiovascular disease is one of the leading causes of death in aging mammals, including humans. The arterial walls, the lining of the heart chambers, and the valves that keep blood moving in one direction all experience wear from the constant rhythmic pressure of heartbeats. Over decades, this wear accumulates into the damage that leads to heart attacks, strokes, and heart failure. The Greenland shark's heart experiences far less of this mechanical wear per unit of time. Less wear means less structural damage. Less structural damage means a cardiovascular system that stays functional far longer than any comparable system in a warm-blooded animal could. Cold blood is also thicker and moves more slowly through vessels. The heart does not need to pump as forcefully to drive it. Reduced pumping force means reduced pressure against vessel walls with every beat. The entire cardiovascular system operates at a lower mechanical intensity than anything found in mammals, even other large ones. Cardiologists studying comparative biology have taken note. The Greenland shark's cardiovascular design is not just interesting in the context of longevity research broadly. It offers a specific model for what a heart that lasts can look like at the structural and operational level. Understanding why the shark's heart does not develop the calcification, arterial stiffening, and valve degradation seen in aging mammalian hearts could open new directions for treating the same conditions in humans. The research is in early stages. Getting high-quality cardiac tissue from wild Greenland sharks for analysis is logistically difficult. Most samples come from accidentally caught animals, and tissue quality from these samples varies depending on how quickly researchers can process them after capture. But what has been examined suggests a cardiovascular architecture that combines slow operation, low pressure, and cold temperature into a system optimized for mechanical endurance far beyond what warm-blooded biology has ever achieved. The slowest heart in the ocean has been beating quietly and without interruption for longer than any other heart in the vertebrate world. And in that simple mechanical fact lies a clue that medicine is only now beginning to follow toward its implications. The oldest confirmed living tree on Earth is a Great Basin bristlecone pine named Methuselah, growing in the White Mountains of California. Scientists have counted its rings and confirmed it at over 4,800 years old. But among animals, the Greenland shark sits near the top of the longevity record with no close competitors in the vertebrate world. The next oldest confirmed vertebrate, the bowhead whale, reaches a confirmed maximum of just over 200 years. The Galapagos giant tortoise reaches perhaps 170 years in rare cases. The oldest confirmed human life on record was 122 years. The Greenland shark, at its confirmed minimum of 392 years, already doubles the bowhead whale's maximum. At the possible upper estimate of over 500 years, it approaches 2.5 times the bowhead's record, and scientists still have not measured the largest living individuals. Among invertebrates, some species do outlast the Greenland shark. The ocean quahog clam has been recorded at over 500 years, confirmed by growth ring counting. Certain sea urchin species show evidence of extreme longevity. The immortal jellyfish, a small species called Turritopsis dorni, can revert to its juvenile form after reaching adulthood, theoretically cycling indefinitely, though whether any individual actually lives for centuries in practice is unclear. But these animals are built very differently from anything with a backbone. A clam and a shark share almost nothing in terms of biological architecture. The Greenland shark's significance is specifically that it pushes vertebrate longevity into territory previously thought impossible. An animal with a brain, a heart, an immune system, a nervous system, bones and organs structured on the same fundamental plan as your own, living for 5 centuries. This matters for aging research because the closer the biological architecture, the more directly applicable the insights. The Greenland shark does not solve aging the way a clam might, through simplicity and slow chemistry alone. It solves it while running a complex vertebrate body, with all the maintenance demands that involves. That makes it uniquely valuable to medicine, and it makes the upper boundary of the shark's lifespan, the true maximum age any individual can reach, one of the most interesting open questions in vertebrate biology. Scientists believe the answer is somewhere beyond 500 years. The data suggests it. The largest measured animals point toward it, but nobody has yet captured and aged a 21-foot Greenland shark using the radiocarbon method. The most extreme longevity record for a vertebrate animal is almost certainly being set right now by an animal nobody has found. Somewhere in the deep Atlantic there is a Greenland shark alive today that is older than anything else with a backbone that has ever been confirmed by science. It is swimming slowly, Its heart is beating once every 12 seconds. Its eye carries a parasite that has been there for longer than most people's entire family genealogies reach back, and it has no idea what it represents. The Greenland shark faces a problem that no amount of biological resilience can fully solve. Its survival depends on time it may not have. Here is the arithmetic. A female born today takes 150 years to reach reproductive maturity. During those 150 years, she needs cold, deep water to survive in. She needs a healthy prey base to grow on. She needs to avoid fishing gear, ship strikes, and the chemical contamination accumulating in deep ocean food webs. She needs the thermal environment she was born into to remain stable enough to function in. If any of those conditions fail during her first century and a half, she never reproduces. She represents a biological investment of 150 years that contributes nothing to the next generation. Multiply this across a population, and the math becomes alarming. A species whose females spend over a century preparing for their first reproduction cannot bounce back from population loss the way faster breeding species can. The buffer between a healthy population and a collapsing one is thin, and the time needed to detect the problem and respond to it meaningfully exceeds most management planning horizons. Several conservation organisations have pushed for stronger international protections. The species is currently covered under Appendix 2 of the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, which regulates trade in shark products, but does not comprehensively address the bycatch problem. Meaningful protection requires coordinated fisheries management across multiple national jurisdictions, all of which have competing economic interests in North Atlantic fishing. Deep-sea trawling, the practice that poses one of the most direct physical threats to abyssal Greenland shark populations, remains legal and largely unregulated in international waters beyond national exclusive economic zones. The areas where Greenland sharks have been found at extreme depth are often in exactly these international deep-sea zones. Scientists who have dedicated careers to studying this species describe a situation that is both urgent and frustratingly slow to generate policy response. The data demonstrating the shark's vulnerability is solid. The data demonstrating population-level decline is harder to produce because counting animals at 6,000 feet across a hemisphere-sized ocean requires resources that no single research program possesses. What is known is that every large, old Greenland shark alive today represents centuries of irreplaceable biological history. Everyone lost to a net, a warming current, or accumulated chemical burden before its time is a loss measured not in years, but in centuries of potential. The conservation countdown for this species is not measured in decades the way it is for faster reproducing animals. It is measured in the overlap between how fast threats are accelerating and how slowly this animal can possibly respond. The biology of the Greenland shark was built for a world that changed slowly. The world around it is no longer slow. A 500-year-old animal swims in the dark below the Arctic ice right now, carrying a body that has solved problems human medicine is only beginning to understand. Its cells resist the kind of damage that causes aging in almost every other vertebrate. Its heart beats so slowly that the mechanical wear most animals accumulate in a decade takes the Greenland shark a century to match. Its DNA repair systems catch errors that other animals' genomes miss. Its immune function persists for centuries without the collapse that makes old age fatal for most complex life. Its proteins are chemically stabilized against the forces that destroy cellular architecture in other organisms. None of this is accidental. Every one of these systems was refined by hundreds of millions of years of selection pressure in the coldest, deepest, most demanding environment on the vertebrate map. The Greenland shark is what happens when evolution has enough time and enough pressure to build a body specifically for endurance. Science is now reverse engineering that body. Genomics teams are mapping the specific gene variants that contribute to DNA stability. Biochemists are studying the protein stabilization compounds in the shark's tissue. Cardiologists are analyzing its cardiovascular design. Immunologists are examining how its immune cells maintain function across century-long timescales. These threads of research do not converge into a single answer yet. Biology rarely works that way. But they are beginning to reveal a set of interconnected principles. Slow the metabolism, protect the genome, maintain active repair systems, reduce cardiovascular stress, control inflammation. These are the levers the Greenland shark operates, and these are the same levers that aging research in humans is now trying to reach. The distance between a shark genome and a human therapy is enormous. Nobody should expect a Greenland shark longevity drug to appear soon, but the direction of travel in the research is real, and the questions being asked are more specific and more answerable than they were 10 years ago, before anyone knew what was inside the shark's eye lens. Beyond medicine, the Greenland shark is telling us something about our relationship to the ocean's deepest places. For centuries we treated deep water as an empty dumping ground, a place where distance and darkness made consequences invisible. What we are learning is that the deep ocean is full. It is full of animals we have not counted, processes we do not understand, and biological information we cannot afford to lose. The oldest vertebrate alive on Earth does not live in a zoo. It does not live in a laboratory. It lives in the wild, deep ocean that we are still in the process of deciding how to treat. Every policy choice about deep-sea trawling, about Arctic warming, about pollution reaching abyssal depths, is a choice made in the presence of an animal that has been there longer than our civilization has existed. We were wrong about the Greenland shark's age. We thought it lived a few decades. We discovered it lives 5 centuries. The more important question is whether we'll be wrong about what that means, and whether we'll figure out the right answer before the animal that carries it runs out of ocean. It is still down there, right now. Moving slowly through water no sunlight has ever touched. 500 years of biology, swimming.